We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I'm all discombobulated. We're recording at a different time than we usually do. Who knows what could happen? It's all very exciting.
Well, I'm tired and cranky.
Okay.
I haven't eaten enough.
So that's good. That's comforting. That hasn't changed.
Generally speaking, don't feel great.
Oh,
so
well, that's not good.
It's going to be what it is. And plus, my kids are home. School is basically out, almost.
Okay.
Almost. I have a child who is, shall we say, difficult to deal with as far as getting homework turned in on time.
That's
and
the word choice.
Literally the day before the last day of school, and he's in there right now telling me that he's looking at his computer. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I forgot to turn in some stuff. I'm like, it's tomorrow is it?
Yeah.
Tomorrow, like, it's... First of all, you're not even at school. Why are you still doing... I thought you were done. Anyways.
Oh, dear.
So I'm trying to... It's kind of like when you're on a diet and like right before dinner, somebody asks you to sweep the kitchen. Mm-hmm. You're like, I will murder you rather than sweep this kitchen. I need to eat. And that's kind of the way I feel about this school. They're going through school for all these months, and it's supposed to be over, and it's somehow still not. So
it never ends. But yeah, this week, since we are starting at a different time today, I'm the one with a hard out. So this episode will, if it's any longer than 2 hours, it'll be only by a minute or two because I gotta run. So I'll be cutting us off when it's time to go.
Well, look at Rob with the hard out. So let's just get to what you watched, Rob. What'd you watch?
Okay, so Evil Season 4 has started on Paramount Plus. I very much enjoy the show, and it is back, and this is their final season. They knew going in that this is going to be the fourth and final season of Evil. They are releasing it weekly, so there's just been the one episode posted on Paramount Plus at the time that we're recording this. But yeah, they're like, okay, we know this is it. We know this is the final season. We are going to set the stage cleanly, which I like. I like in storytelling where they're just like, you know what? We're just going to clearly well define where our characters are beginning at this season, and then we are going to go, and we're not going to stretch anything out.
Sprinting. Yeah. We're sprinting to the end of this thing.
That's the way that it feels, and I like it. I like it a lot. So if you
that actually makes me want to watch it again, honestly.
If you ever wanted to know... What is Rob's type of humor? It is this. This is absolutely up my alley in terms of the I've described it before, the gleeful way that it plays with evil and religious iconography and all those types of things. And I enjoy this show very much. Kristen Bouchard as the lead character, or not that is the lead character's name in there. I'm forgetting the actress's name. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Yeah. Anyway. She is fantastic. I love everything they're doing with her. So Evil Season 4, can't recommend it highly enough, even though it's only one episode in. But I have all the faith in the world because the previous 3 seasons were also good. Then, what did I watch in the way of movies? Well, I did finally get around to seeing Godzilla by Kong, The New Empire, and I will continue to call it.
Is that what we're doing that? Is that what that X is?
That's what I have decided the X is. It's not.
No, it's not.
You're not supposed to say it at all. The officially, you're just supposed to call it Godzilla Kong, The New Empire.
That's dumb.
There's an X there, and it's a little X, and that means it's a by like a 2x4 or 16x9.
Godzilla times Kong.
No.
Equals The New Empire.
It's units of measurement. Godzilla by Kong.
Maybe that colon is just a really small equal sign. It's very... The kerning on that is really off. It's an equation. You didn't know it, Rob. It's an equation.
You're right. This is continuing on with the the Monarch whole series, the universe of monsters. This version of it,
the universe of which is just these movies, because all the rest of them failed.
Well, not entirely. I mean, Kong Skull Island and Godzilla.
They're all the same movie. That's what I'm saying. It's all these Godzilla movies.
Yep. Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, the last one. So it's very silly. It knows exactly what it is. It is absolutely lighthearted, a fun time through and through. Definitely, as you would expect, a great home theater demo material, because yes, there are many fights and explosions, and Godzilla is absolutely hilarious in this because they've basically turned Godzilla's character into a cat, and with the same sort of attitude as a cat of, well, this is where I'm going, and whatever is in my way, I don't care. And if there's something in my way, it is going to be moved out of the way with absolutely no concern for the amount of destruction that will wreak. And that is now Godzilla's character. Whereas Kong is very much humanized, turned into our sort of, he's the character we care about. He's the one who is a good guy and works hard and cares about other people.
Godzilla the cat as a good, I think that's a good... Yeah. I would like Godzilla as a cat.
That's exactly what they've done.
Did you like this building? This one right here?
Yep.
Tip. Oh.
And Godzilla even does if I fits, I sits. That's exactly what Godzilla does in this movie. So the humans are the paperist thin paper cutouts of human being characters. They are just caricatures, no question. But is
Millie Bobby Brown still in this thing?
She is not in this anymore. She's not part of this series anymore. I don't know if they'll bring her back at some point, but nope, she's not in this one. And everybody's having a blast. There's nothing the least bit scary about this. It's not going for that tone whatsoever. It is a pure, lighthearted, fun time. And yeah, I can give it a thumbs up for that because it knows what it is. It's not trying to pretend to be anything else. And there is some good monster versus monster action scenes in this, and off we go. It's a fun time. Looks great, too. Weta Digital did all the special effects and looks fantastic. Excellent special effects.
And then they immediately went out of business.
I don't know. Weta's still around. So.
I'm joking. It's just usually the way that those things work. Like, here's our Oscar for best special effects in The Lord of the Rings. And also, we're bankrupt. How is that possible?
Weta's doing all right. But yes, from lighthearted, barely any story, but good home theater demo material, the other movie I watched this week was American Fiction.
Also lighthearted with good special effects.
I would not say so. Although, I mean, it's not... Well, no, it's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy, but done deftly with a very good touch, dealing with heavy emotional material. But this is all done through a satirical lens. So the idea in this movie is a black author who is fed up with like his book showing up in the African American author section of the bookstore because he's like, nothing I write about is specifically about being black. He's writing about what he studied for. He has a doctorate. All of his siblings and his mother and father, they were all medical doctors. So he's like the black sheep in the family having a doctorate, but not in medicine. And so, I mean, they are wealthy. The family owns like 3 houses, but the father is gone. The mother has the onset of Alzheimer's. He's kind of estranged from his siblings. And so, he's put everything into his career, moved away from the family. But with the mother's condition, he's sort of forced to move back. He's also very, very angry and acting out. He's teaching at a university and he's sort of letting his temper get the best of him there. So they're like, you need a break with everything that's going on. He also hasn't published in like 10 years because he's so fed up with publishing in general. And so all of this leads to him deciding, because he comes across the new hot book that like is on all the talk shows and everything, and it's this very well-spoken, very well-educated black woman who has written the book, but she's written it all in like ghetto-sounding language that sounds absolutely ridiculous when she reads her own excerpts and stuff. And he's just like, well, if this is getting all this praise and I need money to help take care of my mother and life is kind of falling apart, he's like, as a joke, he's going to write the most base, cliched, all the, terrible things that you would think of like he pretends to be a former convict and all this stuff, like takes on a pen name, and he does it all and sends it off to his publisher, who's like, okay, so can I like call this performance art? Because people know your name and this isn't what you do. He's like, no, just put it under a fake name and send it out for real and let's see what the industry makes of it. And of course they love it. Right. It becomes like his most successful thing ever. Now, this was based on an actual novel, which was written very satirically. They stuck by all accounts, I haven't read the book, so I'm not sure, but by all accounts, stuck pretty darn closely to, the names and the titles and the plot of what plays out is pretty close to one for one. But since they adapted it into a movie, I think they tried to be, in the very final moments of the movie, one step too clever, because clearly in the novel, it was not a movie adaptation. And so they tried to pull a little bit of the meta commentary about, like in the book, he was commenting on the publishing industry. So in the movie, they try to do a little bit of commenting on the movie industry, which wasn't in the novel. And I'm like, well, since you didn't base it on the original novel, I think you tried to go one step too clever at the very end, and you didn't have something in the novel to actually base it on. And it was a tonal whiplash for me right at the end, because
kind of like the last season of Game of Thrones, where they just said, well, I guess we got to write something.
Not that it was bad. And this is one where I'm going to look forward to watching American Fiction a second time, because now that I know that that's where things are leading in the movie version, it won't like throw me for a bit of loop, because
some movies are like that.
Yeah, I found myself really, really invested in this family and in this character, all the way up to, 8/10 of the way through this movie. It drew me in more and more and more, until I was choking up at one of the scenes. It was really, really well done, because it wasn't all, like, none of it was hit you over the head with it. It was all subtly done, very realistically done, very believably done. And so I have huge praise for it, with a tiny little bit of misgiving at the very end. But I think on second watch, I'll appreciate it a lot more. So that's my take on American Fiction.
Kind of the way I felt about Good Place.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't that there was tonal shifts, even though I do not love the arc where they have new people in the Good Place. And they're trying to make them better. That arc I don't love as much. But so I haven't really watched anything this week. It's end of school year. I had my son's graduated last weekend, and then the weekend before last, and this last weekend we had a graduation party for him.
Okay.
And they, so that was a whole rigmarole of having to clean the house, and my wife deciding that things needed to be moved around that really didn't need to be moved around. But so I didn't really watch I did start last night watching Kaleidoscope, which is a Netflix series.
And is that the one where they're like, watch it in any order and the titles are colors?
Yes. Okay. Each episode is a color and titled color, green, colon something.
Yeah.
I don't really remember. I finished the first. My understanding is you're fed episodes in random order too. Like they are not. Yeah, you are not. Yeah. You don't know what order you're going to see them in.
Yeah. Every person who comes into Netflix, every profile, they randomize the order of the episodes, and then if you just play them through, you'll get whatever random order they gave you. Yeah.
And you're supposed to be able to watch it in any order whatsoever.
Right.
I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I don't know. So far, it's the main character is Giancarlo Esposito. I think I got that right. Mm-hmm. Esposito. Of course, he's great. He's phenomenal. He's a phenomenal actor.
Gus from Breaking Bad, or the bad guy from The Mandalorian. I'm forgetting the Moff Gideon.
Yes,
Moff Gideon. That's
Moff Gideon. Yes. Rufus Sewell is in this.
Okay.
And he is somehow. He looks like he must have had work done, but it's so good you can't tell.
Oh, interesting.
Like he is so young. He looks so young still, and he's got such a great voice.
Did they digitally de-age him?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen the picture of him right here, and he looks pretty young.
He's just taking care of his skin. Good for him.
And so far, I think it's just with one episode. It's hard with one episode to really judge a thing, but we'll see how it goes. It's at least interesting, and it's well shot, and production value is very high. I don't know how much money they spent on it, but it doesn't look like it's on the back lot of. I tell you what, the production value looks better than the new Indiana Jones movie.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough.
Okay. New Indiana Jones movie was definitely filmed like Harrison Ford was like, I am not traveling for this crap. Okay. Yep. I'm in LA. I'm shooting in LA. Any scene with me? LA. Okay.
I mean, Kaleidoscope was made during the time when Netflix was just throwing the money around. They're like, hey, you've got an idea. Here it is. We're not going to watch it. We're just going to put it on the streaming service because we don't have time to vet anything.
That's right. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
And I just haven't had time to watch anything in here. And then hopefully things will settle down in the next week or two, and I'll be able to,
I'm still
watch some
very
stuff.
eager to hear what you think of Across the Spider-Verse when you get to it, because now that you've got your OLED, it's an absolute must-watch. That's got to be your first thing.
Okay. Well, I'll get on that.
Yeah.
I don't have a copy of that yet.
You will.
I know, one day. All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your question answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us a question at avrant.com. Go to the website and comment. No, can you comment? I don't think so.
Nah.
Go to the website, find our old our episodes, our show notes, along with our Flickr albums, where you can follow along with the pictures that we will be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, you can find us on Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where that's our live recording session. Rob graciously,
perhaps is the word you were looking for.
My brain is not working right now. I just
It's
got to
too
have a
late in the
2 hour
day.
Yeah, it is too late in the day, and I just got to have a 2 hour meeting, and I'm undercaffeinated, and it's just sort of
I know.
I should be sleeping right now,
you.
I'll be honest with you. Has graciously put up the images so that you can follow along on YouTube if you'd like. You can just put it on the background, just like listen to it, and every once in a while we're talking about a picture, you can glance over.
Yeah.
And there it is.
That's the way to do it, all right.
It's what God made second monitors for, in case you're wondering.
There's also timestamps. Those are handy because you can just bounce around right to the beginning of each individual question or topic that we've talked about. Very handy stuff.
That's right. And then tell us how stupid we are.
Yeah.
I like that. I like being told I'm stupid.
Not that you read the YouTube comments. You read them even less than I do.
It is not possible to read YouTube comments less than I do.
Yeah, zero. Yeah.
In fact, the videos that I do watch on YouTube, none of which are ours, every single time I have scrolled down to read a comment, I have regretted it.
Yeah.
You know, if I scroll down just to see like what people are saying, I've regretted it almost every single time.
That's fair.
There's one series of videos where I don't regret it, but most of the time it's like they either spoil something, or a lot of times they spoil it.
Yeah.
They either spoil something, or they're just hateful, or they're just make me lose.
Also, I am finding just watching YouTube videos now is just painful. The ad interruption is so egregious, so horrible. I mean,
and it's they're clearly using some sort of algorithm or AI or whatever you want to call it to say what is the moment where people definitely do not want to add.
Yeah.
Because they want to, they're invested and they want to see what happens next. That's where we're putting.
Yeah, I mean, I know they want to push us all to get premium, but all it's doing is making me not want to watch YouTube. Full stop.
So I've talked about it on the
really
podcast.
bad.
My wife and I watch World Athletics all the time, so we watch, it'd be high jump or pole vault or hammer throw or something like that, and or sprinting or whatever, running. And if it's a close race, or if somebody's it's right before they hit the finish line,
and then when it comes back from the ad, there's like that tiny little bit of a second missing, so it's not a perfect seamless match from when it cut off. You miss a little bit, and it's right at that moment.
And the ads are like 45 seconds long now. Have you lost your dang minds?
And I love the little thing, if I do happen to watch it through a smart TV interface, where it actually puts just audaciously in the top left corner longer but fewer ad breaks. And I'm like, oh, really? Every 2 minutes is fewer now? Like, it's so bad. But all of that is a preamble to say you won't have ads interrupting our podcast on YouTube if you're just listening to the audio-only version and you've never checked out the YouTube version. Like, oh, that sounds awful. I don't want to do it. Well, that was a mistake on my part, because if you're hearing me now, we do the mandatory ads that you can't get away from at the very beginning and the very end of the video, but that is it.
You have
we
to have
no
some ads.
interruptions for 2+ hours while it goes on. So we won't do that. Although maybe you want a break from our faces, which would be fair enough, but that's what the pictures are for.
Close your eyes. Contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His social media is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, then you have to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and send us a PayPal donation. Or you can go to patreon.com/avrantpodcast, where you can become a monthly contributor to the podcast. Every month, they'll take some money from you, give most of it to us. We have 134 patrons right now, including Terry. Thank you very much, to all of our patrons and Terry.
That's right. That's awesome. That's patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up, or re-sign up if you went away and would like to come back for an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 134 paying patrons over there. Terry, thank you for being one of them.
So remember, it's almost end of the month.
That's right. Credit cards.
Almost June.
Expiry dates.
Yeah. So if you can't support us financially, we understand. Just do something to support us, and we will mention you here. One of the ways that we can support you is by testing out your movie codes on your discs, just to see if they work. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
True.
JD sent a movie anywhere code, U.S. only, so Rob didn't steal it from me.
That's right.
Jerk. And it did, in fact, work.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it was a movie I was very interested in having available. So now my wife cannot see both the first and the second part of that movie. If I were to have used it, which I just tested it. I didn't
hint.
Use it.
What could have been part 1 and part 2 just recently?
What could it
big
be?
Movie recently come out. Yeah. Never know.
We also got notes of gratitude. Thank you, JD. Notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through.
Gestures widely.
It's very hot in Florida right now. Does that count as something?
Surprise.
I don't know.
Who would have guessed?
I don't know. Maybe that's why I don't feel good.
Could be.
We got notes of gratitude from Ilango, Terry, who's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, Tom, not me, different guy, Andrew, and Dan. So Ilango, Terry, Tom, Andrew, and Dan, thank you for thanking us.
That is right. Ilango, Terry, Tom, Andrew, Dan, thank you very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right, in the news, we kind of did we talk? I thought we talked about this last week.
We talked about it, but I didn't have all the details. I wanted to double check, and it was the big news. And there wasn't really, as of when we're recording this, some other big news to talk about. So I put it in here because let's confirm what I was guessing at last week.
All right, the Sonos Ace headphones were announced last week. You can pre-order them ahead of their June 5th shipping date. They're priced at 450 buckaroos, and we can't understand why everybody in the tech press is fawning all over them. I can. Because they're a bunch of dweebs. That's why. Honestly, I don't get it. So I just reviewed on AV Gadgets the Soundcore Boom 2, which is a portable Bluetooth speaker. I've done the Motion Boom Plus on there as well. And then I also own the Motion Boom. So Motion
Soundcore
Boom,
took that Boom name, even though JBL has that trademarked up
whatever.
the wazoo. Wow.
Whatever. I don't know. They've somehow got around
Gutsy.
it. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're gutsy. But the Motion, they could drop the Motion, and now it's just Boom, and then the Boom 2.
Okay.
So it's Motion Boom, and then the Boom Plus is just a bigger version, and then so Boom, Motion Boom, then Boom 2 is the sequel to that one. Right. And they're about the same size and the same shape, and the little bit the new one's a little bit better. Blah 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 blah. Right? But everybody like I write my review. My review goes out, and then I see all over ads. Blah blah blah. 140 watts. Where the heck are they getting the 140 watts from? Like, where are they getting it from? Like, I do not get it. The thing has like 2 tweeters and like 2 sci-firing woofers or something like that. And I think they're adding. I don't really know.
Well, yeah, like is there an individual amplifier for each driver? So if you add them all up,
I don't think so. The way that the spec sheet is listed is 50 watts for like the woofers, and like the 2 drivers that are inside are like 30 watts each. And I'm like, I don't.
Or 20 watts each. 50 plus 50 plus 20 plus 20. That'd be 140.
But I don't think that there was just 50 watts for both of the woofers. Nah. It was not. It was saying a racetrack 50 watt racetrack woofer.
Yeah.
Which I think is a woofer on one side and a passive radiator on the other is what I think they really mean there. But now everybody's reporting it as 140 watts. I'm like, you ask, why are they so excited? It's because the press release told them to be.
Yeah, I know.
It's so disingenuous. How hard is it to read this and go, well, this kind of sucks? You don't have to even know that much about headphones to know that the 450 better have something special about it. I mean, and this one does not.
It better be special. So,
all right. As far as premium Bluetooth headphones go, they do check all the boxes, of which you can get all these boxes checked for about.
Oh, I know,
$100.
But I'm just saying that at least if you're comparing them to the other Bluetooth headphones that are over $400, they do the following. Yes.
The ear cups look like Apple AirPods Max, while the headband looks like a Sony WH-1000, probably all made in the same factory. They just swapped it.
Who knows?
They claim a 30-hour 30 whole hours, Rob? Not 3 freaking months?
Oh, definitely not claiming that.
30 hours. Huh. That's amateur hour. That's
the goalposts for Tom have
That's
been
the
moved.
shallow end of the battery.
Yes.
3 hours of let me say something about that. 30-hour battery life with active noise canceling turned on. They have rapid charging to give you 3 hours of battery life after just 3 minutes of charge. A full charge takes 3 hours. I bet you won't actually get 3 hours for 3 minutes, but whatever. They have an aware mode that lets in important outside sounds. Oh, geez, they invented that. They can connect to more than one Bluetooth source and smartwatch between them.
Switch. Yeah.
Smart switch between them, whatever. Oh, and smart switch between them. Oh, I see. You know who invented that? Not Sonos. Bluetooth
I know.
did.
I'm not saying. I'm not
Bluetooth.
saying they invented.
I'm not talking to
any
you. I'm talking to people listening to this thing. Shut up.
Just the checklist features.
They color coded the inside of their ear cups because there's no other way to tell left from right. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
There's no symbol you could have put on the inside here to help people out.
Nothing clearer.
Nothing. You couldn't even draw an ear on the inside with the right orientation to let you know which way it's supposed to go. The ear pads are held on with magnets so they can be easily replaced, and they're covered in vegan leather. Tell you what, vegans hate it when you skin them. They do. Everybody knows that. They are anti-skinning. They are. They have hard button controls, no touch controls or gestures, which I approve of.
Yes.
They come in a nice case with a removable pouch for the USB-C cords that include a USB-C to USB-C cable for charging and lossless listening, and a USB-C to 3.5 millimeter adapter cable for analog sources. Naturally, to access all of their features like custom EQ and head tracking for spatial audio, which works with Apple Music, Amazon Music Unlimited, and Tidal, you'll need to connect the Sonos Ace Headphones to the Sonos app. And that's where some of the weird things start to make themselves evident. They offer Bluetooth aptX lossless, which is a newish upgraded codec, but it's only from certain Android phones. If you want lossless from your iPhone, you have to use the USB-C cable, which, if you ask any iPhone user, is a feature, makes it better.
Maybe, yeah.
Because that's what cults say about things. We were correct last week. The Sonos Ace headphones do not show up as just another Sonos device in the app. They're just Bluetooth headphones. So they don't synchronize with any of your other Sonos speakers, and they don't work over Wi-Fi. So why do you need them specifically? Because you are brainwashed. That's why. For one, Sonos specific the one Sonos specific feature they offer is home theater audio swap. It only works with the Sonos Arc soundbar, and it only works if you have an iOS device in the iOS version of the Sonos app. They say the support for Android version of the app and their Beam and Ray soundbars is coming soon, right after somebody actually uses it once. You can swap audio from the Arc soundbar to the Ace headphones in the iOS app, or you can long press the content key button on the Ace headphones after you've set up home theater audio swap in the iOS app. If you don't like the head tracking positioning for spatial audio, you have to turn it off and back on again in the app to reset the position. So you literally have to turn them on while facing the direction you want the spatial audio.
That's right. If you put those headphones on and do the home theater's audio swap and you happen to be looking to your left or right or
just
even up or down, you gotta be looking right dead ahead when you do it, or else the head tracking positioning is wrong. And they don't have a push and hold this button to reset your position. Nope, you gotta pull out the app, turn it off, and turn it back on again. I'm like, now that's a feature.
That's a feature. It silences the soundbar when you swap because Sonos Ace headphones can't synchronize with other Sonos speakers. So you can listen to the audio on your TV, or you can listen to the audio, or everybody else in the room can listen to it, but not both at the same time.
Correct.
That's stupid. A bunch of people online are falling all over themselves to say how great that is. Wouldn't it have been great if Sonos had solved the issue of perfect audio synchronization between speakers and headphones so that someone who is hard of hearing could wear the Ace headphones while other people listen to the soundbar, and it was all simple to use? Now, that's for the $800 one, which is only going to work with one specific Android phone.
Straight up, that was the very first and kind of only feature that I was 100% expecting from Sonos headphones. Because I was like, why? Why should Sonos make headphones? And I'm like,
because they just printing money. That's why.
That makes sense. But also, what is the killer feature that they could say, this is what $450 Sonos headphones can do that no other headphones can do? Because look, Apple can make their case with their AirPods and their AirPods Max that as long as you have other Apple devices, the spatial audio, the head tracking, the seamless switching from device to device, like these are things that just work best when it's Apple with other Apple. And you have other headphones, absolutely you can use other Bluetooth headphones, sound will come out, but you won't get all the seamless easy switching features and the head tracking and the spatial audio and all that type of stuff. And then you can also pair it with your Apple TV 4K, and the Apple TV 4K's HDMI port can work as an HDMI ARC port, so you can have audio from other sources or from the TV streaming apps go through the Apple TV 4K device and into your AirPods Max headphones with head tracking and spatial audio. I'm like, okay, so you're making a case like it's still way overpriced for those headphones. I still don't think they sound fantastic, but here are some features that works best Apple with Apple. So Sonos, go ahead, make the same case. And there's the obvious thing, which is, hey, these are Sonos headphones. If you have other Sonos products, the thing they're going to do is synchronize with all your other Sonos speakers. And when you have a Sonos soundbar, you're going to be able to put the headphones on and have perfect synchronization, which honestly is way harder to achieve than we all want it to be. It's kind of dumb how difficult it is to get that perfect synchronization between your TV speakers or your soundbar or your home theater system and a pair of headphones for someone who needs that assistance because they're hard of hearing or whatever the case might be. Or maybe they're just out in a different room, but they still want to keep track of what's going on in the TV room. So that'd be great. You could put on a pair of headphones and everything stays synchronized, and you walk back in and you take the headphones off and you're in perfect sync and it was all seamless. That's a killer feature. It'd still be overpriced, but that would be a feature of like, hey, you know what? That's a thing that makes sense for Sonos to offer that nobody else is doing. Certainly not that
literally easy. Asked for that this week. They asked for
100%
a sound bar that they could use with headphones.
That's right.
Wanted to.
And so how that isn't here? How like what really blows my mind are all the tech journalists and all the people in the YouTube comments. I don't know if they're bots or AI or what at this point, but I'm like I get it. It certainly is handy to be able to say, I'm listening to a soundbar right now, and now I want to silence it, but I just want to listen through headphones, and there's a way to swap between the two. That makes sense. It's not like I don't want that feature to exist. Of course, there's a use case for that. But to like be falling all over yourself about that, I'm like, it's not that hard if you had wireless headphones to put them on and then press mute on your soundbar. Like, I realize that's maybe one step farther. Oh, you still have to press a button on this. You either have to open the app and do the swap, or you have to press and hold a button on the headphones themselves, so it's not completely buttonless, so I don't know. I'm befuddled. I'm very confused as to why people are like praising this like crazy. What is going on? At least it tells me, okay, all of these tech journalists and YouTubers, I'm like, I don't believe anything you guys say anymore, if I ever did to begin with, because this is ridiculous that you're praising these things so much. It makes no sense to me. None.
I know. And this whole idea that good headphones have to be expensive is just
right.
Lately, I have not tested a pair of headphones that has been over $300.
Yeah,
and $300 is a chunk of change. Don't get me wrong, but you can get really good, just really good headphones for.
Yeah, and I mean the headphone part of these Sonos headphones, like I'm not like.
There's no.
I haven't heard them. I'm not going to claim that they sound bad or something. There's no reason why they should sound bad.
I think they sound great.
They're a single dynamic driver. There's nothing like particularly wild and amazing or innovative about the.
They're not even talking about how they sound. They're talking about all the stuff they can do.
But it's only stuff that everything else can do. I don't know. I'm so confused.
you are in the same boat as every Android user when when Apple announced Face ID, and everybody was like, "What are you talking about?" Right. We've had it for so long. We stopped using it because it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
You know.
Or the 120 hertz screen refresh on the phones is limited to the Pro models only. And they're talking about how amazing and smooth it is. And everyone who's with an Android phone is like, well, that's like table stakes. Like the lowest end Android phones have 120 hertz screens. What is 60 hertz on a screen anymore? So,
it was like the entire plasma industry when LCD started talking about 60 hertz and 120 hertz refresh rates. And they're like, I mean, we got like 680 something. I don't know, what is ours?
960 for a plasma. Yes, yeah.
It's like they were like, we don't even talk about that because it's like. Then they did.
They started putting that on the box because like, well, we can honestly claim our refresh rate is way, way, way higher.
So dumb. But if you put it on the box, it's just we're just doing just likes, but it's just like all the things that now say gluten free. You're like, you are cornflakes. We know that you are gluten free. You are made of corn. It is not that hard to figure it out. You need to you didn't change anything. You just slapped a sticker on the box.
It's meat free too.
Okay. So last week we covered the Comcast announcement of their StreamSaver bundle that includes Peacock, Netflix, Apple TV Plus for a vastly reduced quote unquote price. Well, now we have that price and just in time for the May 29th launch, which is tomorrow as we're recording this, or
you might be hearing it on YouTube on the day. That's a possibility.
$15 a month. Yeah. Naturally, that's for the ad-supported versions of Netflix and Peacock. Apple TV Plus doesn't have ads or tiers. So compared to getting all three services separately, that's 3 cents shy of an $8 savings a month. Not too bad.
Yeah, that's actually a little bit more than I predicted, right? I thought it was going to be 6 because I thought what they were literally going to do was give you Peacock for free, and that Netflix and Apple TV Plus were going to take exactly the same amount of money as if you had got them separately, but that Comcast was going to throw Peacock in there for free. That was my prediction, but this is actually like Netflix is taking $1 less, Apple TV Plus is taking $1 less, and Peacock is in there for free, and that's how we arrive at this price.
Well, my problem is that all these stupid bundles and changes and stuff like that, I pay for Netflix like yearly or something like that, or maybe it's monthly, but like
I don't think you can do
Amazon
Netflix
Prime.
Yearly, yeah, Amazon Prime
I pay yearly,
sure. Yeah.
And I think even with Disney, I did it yearly.
Yeah,
so how do I? Yeah. I want to roll all this stuff over and maybe add some things or change some things, but they make it impossible to do so, which is really stupid. Anyways. Naturally, it's for the ad-supported versions of Netflix and Peacock. Apple TV Plus doesn't have tiers or ads. So compared to getting... Oh, wait, I already said that.
You did.
And Peacock already announced they are raising their prices by $2 a month in July. So it's a $10 a month savings in about a month.
That's right.
But what if you don't want ads? For Netflix, you can just pay the difference in price. So sign up for StreamSaver first, then log into your Netflix account either through Comcast Xfinity or directly on the Netflix website. And change to the standard or premium plan, you can still save $8 a month or $10 a month starting in July versus getting all three streaming services separately. But what about ad-free Peacock? But remember, this is Comcast we're talking about here, so it's complicated.
Must be.
Of course. Unlike Netflix, you can't just subscribe to StreamSaver and then choose to pay the $6 a month extra to get the ad-free Peacock. Not yet, at least. A spokesperson said they might offer that option in the future, but for now, you have to cut off a finger and send them that finger.
They might like that.
But for now, what you can do is subscribe to Comcast Now TV plus StreamSaver. Now TV is a selection of 40 live TV streaming channels, and that plus StreamSaver with ads is being offered at $30 a month. And if you get that, then you have the option to pay the extra $6 a month for ad-free Peacock.
Yeah.
And you could change your Netflix subscription to be ad-free and pay the difference in price for that as well. So that's perfectly clear, right? And I mean, no. What? I don't want the Now TV, though.
But yeah.
So you have to have ads if you get this, basically.
That's what they're saying. Peacock with the bundle, with the StreamSaver bundle, Peacock is going to have ads unless you pay another $15. So it's $15 a month for the StreamSaver.
Right.
That's ads on Netflix and Peacock. That's the starting point. If you pay another $15 a month, that adds on Now TV, which is 40 live streaming channels from Comcast. That's just what it is. You don't get to choose what the 40 channels are. It's just a bundle of 40 live streaming TV channels. So now you're at $30 a month for 40 live streaming channels and ad-supported Netflix and Peacock. Then you can pay another $6, so up to $36 now. That would get you ad-free Peacock, and then whatever tier of Netflix you want to get, you could pay the difference in price for that and finally get to ad-free everything. So you're at like $50 a month by this point.
I was going to say that it's like 30, but 15 plus 15 plus 6 plus 6, right?
Well, no, because ad-free Netflix is like $9 more minimum than ad-supported Netflix. So yeah, you're like, you're at $45 there. And if you want Dolby Vision and Atmos, then that's at $23 a month right now. So, it's another however much that is over the standard. Netflix is getting ridiculous. Anyway, it's not all that cheap if you want ad-free. That's the end of it.
Comments from our listeners. Andrew heard our praise for the EDID editing features that Integra added to the DTM 7.4 stereo receiver model that I recently wrote about on AV Gadgets. Mm-hmm. He just wanted to let everybody know that Denon and Marantz models have actually offered similar features for several years now, but they are hidden in the web interface for custom installers. He has solved some HDMI issues, mainly pre-run HDMI cables that aren't easy to replace, by applying custom EDID settings that limit the bandwidth and turn off some optional features. So Integra is not the only game in town for this sort of thing. I did not know that.
That it was very good information to have. I appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah, now I know. Still can't, none of us can do it. But it's nice to know it exists.
That's right.
So Dan is pretty furious about the recent Sonos app updates and force changes. He bought the $450.
No, this is the app, not the Ace headphones yet.
Sorry.
Yeah, just the app.
Dan says it's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
He's been using Sonos since 2006. He's been a loyal customer. No one ever starts off with their comment that ends with, and I love you, with, I've been a loyal customer since.
Yeah.
The end of that is always, and you should die on a pyre of your own making. He's been a loyal customer and upgraded to make sure all of his devices use the latest S2 platform, which I guess is important.
Yeah.
Now his system is the worst it's ever been. He's ready to throw it all out and completely switch over to Blue Sound. What was Sonos thinking? How do we stop this madness?
They've promised that all the features that they ripped away when they did the app update that you couldn't avoid unless you turn off automatic updates ahead of time, and now it's too late and you can't roll it back. They promised that, all those features, they're on the roadmap, they're going to bring them back, but they were so determined because, some part of this new app is apparently necessary to get these Sonos Ace headphones doing all of their, at this point, still limited features, because some things work with Android but not with iOS and vice versa, and promising that they're going to have cross-pollination compatibility at some point coming soon. But apparently something in the new version of the app was necessary for the Sonos Ace headphones. So I don't know why it was impossible to delay the launch until the software was ready, but they picked a date. This is when the headphones are coming out. Here comes the app, and they're like, well, a bunch of features are broken now, and we're just going to promise everybody that eventually we'll get it working again and bring it back. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're planning. I guess they're just confident enough that everybody's locked in and isn't actually going to leave, but it does seem like a strange decision. The thing is, all the people who are out there shouting, hey, get WIM products, the WIIM thing, because they're like, hey, that can do a lot of things that are similar to Sonos and the prices are lower anyway, and we love it. But we've already seen, like, WIM just announced, they're two considerably more expensive products that don't outright replace the ones that they already have, but would I be surprised if it starts getting difficult to find the original less expensive versions in favor of the new much more expensive, needlessly so, because nobody needs a 768 kilobit per second sampling rate on your MP3s, but it's like, that's the DAC that they threw in there, so that's worth an extra $150.
Hear them at all.
Yeah,
that's how good they sound.
So everybody who's praising WIM, I'm like, no, WIM came in and did the same thing that every upstart does, which is undercut the competition, and then once they get a little bit of a loyal fan base, start raising the prices. Not outright on the products that already exist, but the new products they introduced, just like Sonos, every time Sonos introduces a new replacement product, surprise, surprise, it costs more than the one that it just replaced. And that's exactly what WIM is doing. I'm not predicting that they're going to, 25 years from now, if WIM is still around, people are going to be complaining about them too and saying, hey, what's the next upstart that is replacing them? And will we actually switch over there, or have I bought too many products and I'm too locked in to change what I'm doing now? That's what they count on, apparently.
It is disgusting how sometimes these companies just are like, internally, there's some engineer just throwing himself at the wall, just screaming. You can't push the app. You can't.
Right.
It's not. Yeah, it breaks everything. Yes. They're like, but do the headphones work? Yeah, the headphones work. Don't worry about it. We just need the headphones to work. That's right. But it breaks everything else. Don't worry. I'm sure it's fine.
You know what the app broke, Tom? Playlists. Your playlist.
Why would you want that with a music
would your
app?
Whole house audio system possibly make use of playlists?
Tell you what,
capitalism.
The only level, Sonos is at a level where you can break playlists and people will be mad but stick with you. Apple is at the level where they could delete all your playlist, not let you get them back, and people would still be like, but Apple's still the best.
Could be. Let's do some questions.
Apple TV is
Let's do some questions.
Apple TV 4K is pretty good, though. I will tell you that. It's better than that Roku was. But that Roku was older, so it's not a one-to-one comparison. So we'll just go. Questions, Ilango. So the original plan in Ilango's house was to renovate the basement after the upstairs renovations were all complete, but some hidden issues made themselves apparent, and rather than put a temporary Band-Aid on things, they decided to fully fix what was wrong and get a jump on the basement renovation at the same time. So the entire basement was taken right down to the studs and foundation. Everything is fixed, and they've taken the opportunity to seal and insulate the foundation, which is good. You should do that.
That was a good move. It will pay dividends in the long run. That is clearly the cost benefit ratio calculation that you did in your head, and I 100% agree. Yeah. If you have the ability to do this, this is the way to do it. I love it. That's great. Clean slate.
So it was always a plan to turn half of the main part of the basement into a full-fledged home theater, but they wanted to keep the space looking and feeling like a normal family room. His wife is good with constructing new walls that will separate the theater from the home gym, as well as adding a door between the theater and the gym, but she is not keen on the idea of constructing an entire new back wall for the theater that would close off the theater from the stairs. Okay, we're going to have to look at some... You guys are going to have to maybe look at...
It would be helpful to look at a diagram on this one, but basically the stairs come down into the basement directly into what is intended to be the future home theater room. Now, it is a very long room, we're going to find out in a moment, but it's 31 feet long. So the intention isn't really to use literally the entire space as the home theater area. So Ilango, of course, I mean, he's been a listener of this podcast, written into us many times, and he's well aware that, if you could completely seal off the home theater, so much the better, but it makes sense for resale value, for keeping his wife happy, for all those reasons. She's like, no, I want to be able to come down, enter directly into this room, not have it completely sealed off from the rest of the house. I'm envisioning, and I'm sure that Ilango thought of this too, like on the diagram just to the right of the new door that they intend to install between the theater and what's going to become the home gym. Like if a wall just ran right along there that could create a new back wall for the theater, you'd have sort of an antechamber, which is, where the stairs come down, and then have the doors that go into the bathroom area and into the gym area, and that would all be separated from the theater. But it seems like that idea has been floated and it is a no-go, and that's okay. Tom is looking, I think.
I am looking. I'm trying to figure out where all these things are. There's the bathroom. Okay, existing bathroom. I see it. Okay, there's a bedroom there. Okay. Good news is that Ilango has a contact with soundproofing company, and they've been tremendously helpful in coming up with a plan to address the stairs and the flanking path they will create, as well as advising him on the entire construction of the room to make sure it will meet their soundproofing needs. But since everything is wide open right now, Ilango wants to make sure he plans ahead for all of his home theater wiring, and that means figuring out his seating position and speaker configuration. Mm-hmm. That's where he could use our help. So according to the soundproofing company's plans, once the room is finished, it should have an interior dimension of 13 feet 10 inches wide by 31 feet long. The ceiling joists are only 12 inches on center. They are 2x10s with cross bracing, so there's less space within the ceiling joists than is typically the case. Ilango is quite certain they will opt for a wall-mounted flat panel on the wall farthest from the stairs. A 97-inch OLED would be great if they're affordable at the time the theater is ready to go, but a 98-inch or a 100-inch LCD is certainly an option as well. So a couple of questions straight off the bat. Given the width of, say, a 100-inch LCD TV and the proposed interior width of the finished room, that would leave him with about 3 feet on either side of the TV. Realistically, is that enough space for him to install corner bass traps, place a subwoofer in the front left corner, potentially another sub in the front right corner, and position his front left and right speakers? The answer to that question is yes all the way around, but it will kind of depend on a couple of things, including because 3 feet on either side of your TV is a lot of feet, honestly, and you can definitely
that is sufficient. I mean, for all of that to either side of the TV, I wouldn't necessarily want a lot less space than that, but that is enough. 3 feet on either side.
You can put your corner bass trap and then put your subwoofer, whatever cylinder sub you decide
cylinder
to choose.
Would be great. Sure would.
And then in front
nicely.
of that, you can put your speakers. You
if
know what
need
I mean?
be, yep. And in your case, I don't think even that would be necessary. With 3 feet, if you had corner bass traps that, either if it's the full, wedge-shaped corner ones, then a cylinder can stand right in front of those. So we're talking basically 2 feet from the side wall to the, interior edge of a standing cylinder subwoofer. And then, your speakers, your left and right speakers aren't going to be a foot wide unless you go for something a little bit unusual. So, 3 feet on either side, totally going to work.
Yeah. There's no, I feel like that's plenty of room.
Yeah.
So they for sure want to have a couch as a primary seating directly facing the TV. He'd like to have the option of a second row of seating, but the first row couch will be the priority, and they do not have any intention of having a riser for the optional back row. So what we recommend is the distance from the TV to the main couch. It's going to do your field of view. If you have it's really depends on your size. It depends on a couple of things, including the size of your TV, how far into the room the TV is going to be. Mm-hmm. Because if you're wall mounting it, well, that's where we would assume. Let's just assume wall mounting, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
But if you're like, well, I don't want my couch to be there, well, then put your TV on the stand and move it into the room, which is what I did.
Which is nice. You do have the option there that, even a 100-inch TV absolutely still can go on I would want a sturdy TV stand, because the 100-inch TVs are not lightweight, but they do still come with tabletop stands, or you can use a heavy-duty Visa mount universal TV tabletop stand, and that will work absolutely fine. So you do have some latitude there. But what I could talk about, of course, is distance from eyes to screen. And this is just a recommendation. If you know full well that when you go out to the movie theater, you like to sit really close to the screen, well, then you like a field of view that's a bit larger than I personally like. But if you like to sit basically about 1/3 from the back of the theater, 2/3 from the front of the theater, which in like a professional dubbing stage is what they sort of locate as the primary location. That's where pretty much all the mixing and mastering is done in a dubbing stage, is 2/3 of the length of the theater from the front where the screen is. That gives you a 45-degree field of view. That's sort of the standard for movies. So if you had, say, a 98-inch or a 100-inch flat panel TV, if it were wall mounted, then you're counting on that being, about 6 inches from the actual physical wall to the screen itself, or of course it could be a foot or more if it's on the tabletop stand. But from the actual screen surface to your eyes, if you're 8.5 to 9 feet, that's going to be right there at that 45-degree field of view. 9 feet is a little bit less than a 45-degree field of view. 8.5 is a tiny bit more. It's like 8 feet 8 inches is like pretty much exactly spot on. But that's the sort of distance you're looking at eyes to screen. So really, quite realistically and comfortably, if you are 9 or 9.5 feet from where your head is to the physical front wall, then that's almost certainly going to work out well.
Right.
Yeah. But, if you're someone who definitely prefers for viewing angle reasons to be like right close to the back of the theater when you go to the movie theater, then you're probably going to want to be 10.5 feet, something like that. So there's definitely latitude here. I'm going to say it's going to be somewhere between 8 to 10 feet. Most people would feel pretty darn comfortable if they're looking at a 100-inch screen for a movie-like experience.
Right. So what sort of field of view would a second row of seats have as a result? Mm-hmm. Well, add 6 feet to that.
Yeah.
And that'll give you kind of the thing. So let me see.
Yeah, and that basically gives you something in the range of a 25 to 30 degree field of view for that back row. Which certainly for TV viewing, really, really comfortable. I like the idea for people who have two rows. If you're like me and you prefer your movie experience to be a larger field of view than casual TV viewing, it's kind of nice that even if I'm all by myself, I can just choose to sit in my back row if I have it, and that gives me a much more TV-like experience, and then I can sit in the front row and have that larger field of view for the movie experience. So there's even usefulness when it's only you or only you and your wife and there aren't even any guests around. You can still get use out of two rows if you have them.
Yeah. How high should the TV be mounted since he wants to install the wall outlet and cabling on the front wall ahead of time? There's a rule about that, right? As far as where your outlet can be. So I think maybe that's...
Oh, I see. For electrical outlet for code.
Yeah, I think for code it has to be a certain height off the ground. I don't think you can just slam it anywhere. It can be higher, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
But it can't be
and
lower.
I think that's what he's going for. Now, the thing is, you have quite a lot of latitude because a 98-inch flat panel, not even including whatever bezel it has, because TVs these days have very small bezels, but even not including that, that's 47 inches in screen height. So, if you put the panel for this, proposed wall-mounted TV, even if it were a little bit lower that is not perfectly centered or a little bit higher or whatever, it's like you got a pretty big latitude to visually hide it behind a TV that the screen is very nearly 4 feet tall itself. But yeah, the sort of rule of thumb that THX has is if you're just sitting in your primary seat and you take your resting eye line, and this is important because your resting eye line is not necessarily parallel to the floor and ceiling, right? Very often, even in a couch situation, he's not going for recliners, but even in a couch situation, your resting eye line is usually just slightly angled up a little bit. Something like between 8 to 12 degree elevation angle is really, really common when you're sitting for your resting eye line. So THX says, okay, take your resting eye line and then go 15 degrees of elevation above that. And wherever that hits your front wall, that's the maximum height of the top of the screen. That's THX's recommendation. So if the top edge of your screen is more than 15 degrees of elevation above your resting eye line, you're going to have to start moving your eyes or your head to take in the top of the screen. So for comfort purposes, they're like, yeah, don't make the top edge of your screen any more than 15 degrees elevation above your resting eye line. Now, I worked all that out assuming a 9-foot distance to your front wall. And that basically means that from the floor to the bottom of a 100-inch screen, I would have something between like 30 to 36 inches. And that doesn't sound unreasonable to me, right? If you work that out, if your screen image height is about 4 feet tall, and then you have 3 feet or 2.5 feet of space below that. That's not low by any means. That's a little bit elevated. You are looking upwards a little bit at it, but it's a very natural angle if you're just, have your head against the seat back. And if you go towards the higher end of that, then even if you don't have a riser for the second row, they won't have a completely unobstructed view, of course. Of course, you could naturally have seats in the back row that are a little taller than the seats that are in your front row. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. So you'll have a pretty darn good view if you go, I worked it out like 34 inches is probably what I would go for personally, from the floor to the bottom of the screen. So if you go from there, I think that'll get you in the right ballpark.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how quickly you will figure out if your TV is the right height or not. Like in my home theater,
you can do the just putting up tape on the wall.
Yeah,
you can absolutely do that ahead of time. So yeah,
it becomes very apparent very quickly when your TV is just a little bit too high. Like first of all, I've had my screen, which is 92-inch projection screen, at different heights in my home theater, and it was placed lower based on the fact that I needed to the image not to hit the fan
to clear the fan from a projected image,
which had a little bit too low, so that your normal center channel, like the lower center channel stands that you can use, the center was just a little bit covering the screen. It wasn't projecting on the screen, but the sight line was such that it would block my view a little bit, not a lot, and only if I was like slouching or really reclined or lying down. So when I had the chance to raise the screen, I raised it up about, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches, which doesn't seem like a lot with a 92-inch screen. It was enough that everyone in the family went, ugh.
Oh, okay.
It just feels a little too high.
A little too high.
And it's just it clears the screen. It clears the center channel. It looked better on the wall. It was in the better location. It was centered better. I mean, everything about it was better, except it was just a little bit higher than it was before. And that was enough to kind of throw people off. The article that I wrote about when that your TV is too high shows a graphic of this idea that your resting eye line is just a little bit angled up compared to what you see. Like perfectly if you're just to measure your
ahead.
eye height. But you're going to figure it out pretty quick. So what I would do is not mount anything until you've tested it. It is not going to be a long period of time. It just needs to, you get your piece of furniture or whatever it is, you put it on top of it. Some strong boxes or whatever you end up, not boxes, but like cinder blocks or something like that, in order to just keep raising it up until it's the right height. And you go, this is it. And then you measure it.
But yeah, I mean, you're
going to figure it out pretty quick.
For running the wires inside the walls ahead of time, like I say, since you're going for such a large screen, you've got quite a lot of latitude. Also, installers would warn you, don't necessarily like perfectly center where the electrical outlet and the in-wall cable run goes, because that is literally going to be right behind where the mount is. If you perfectly centered it, you want it offset a bit so that you can have room to access it. And thankfully, again, you have quite a lot of latitude because your screen is like 6 feet wide and 4 feet tall, so you've got a pretty good amount where you can put the electrical outlet and the HDMI cable run.
And running the HDMI cable up the wall, and even the in-wall extension cord that we're going to recommend that you do, and that your electrician would do for you anyways. All that stuff can be done afterwards. This is a very...
It could be, yeah.
That is not a hard thing. Running speaker wires in walls, cross ceiling joists, and all this other stuff, you want to do, and conduit and all that, you want to do that ahead of time. No doubt. Not going to argue with that at all. But this little wire run from behind the TV down, just wait. Just just put a bunch of outlets on the front wall.
Questions about that too coming up. So yeah.
He says, any concerns about where the center speaker will go since the TV will be so large? Absolutely not.
No.
I have no concerns.
You'll be fine because if you get a normal TV equipment stand, which many of them are 20 inches to the top shelf, that's going to be like perfect, right? Because you put a center speaker that's between 8 to 10 inches taller than that. The bottom edge of your TV is at 30 inches. Wow, voila, worked out wonderfully. Yeah.
So, these are all your
just some notes,
right? Let me just scroll past that.
So he's trying to decide where all of the home theater equipment should live, as that will obviously have a large impact on where all the wires need to run inside the walls. One option is to keep things simple, just use a stand directly below the TV with a TV that wide. The stand below the TV is about equal. That should be enough room to hold an AV receiver, probably an additional external amp, which you probably won't need, sources, and his center speaker, right?
Absolutely, sure. I would say so. Yes.
There's also the electrical room that already has his network rack in there. He likes the idea of having a home theater rack in that room and keeping the home theater super clean. But he's a little concerned about the distance and how that might impact devices that are controlled via Bluetooth. And then there's also the option to put a home theater rack under the stairs in the rear left corner of the room. So what do we think is best? Can we help him out by talking through this decision? So if you look at the image, the room that he is, the future home theater room, where that window is, I guess, is that where the TV is going to go?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking at the diagram, it's the far right-hand side. That's, opposite the stairs. That's going to be where the TV goes.
Yeah, so I don't hate the idea of putting it all underneath the...
That is 100% what I would do. I would have a TV stand about the same width as your 100-inch TV, and I would put it all at the front of the room. No question.
The Bluetooth part of it certainly does concern me to a certain extent, but what really concerns me more than anything is just any additional length you're going to add to an HDMI run.
Right.
I think when you're spending as much money as you're about to be spending, I'm not really worried about cost as much as I'm worried about
Just fidelity, man. I mean, just
Well,
getting a
just
HDMI cable that's going to work at those distances.
The headache of, you get your fiber optic ultra high speed HDMI cable if there's any issue. I mean, my goodness, is it easier to replace an HDMI cable that is sitting right below the TV screen versus, I mean, if you ran it all the way to the electrical room or to under the stairs, conduit, but even so, I mean, it's just a pain. It's just a hassle. Troubleshooting is more of a hassle. So, I mean, I'm not seeing in this scenario any reason why I wouldn't just put it all at the front of the room, and it's still going to look super clean. You get yourself a nice TV stand, it's going to look super clean.
Yeah, I can make the argument for under the stairs, because that's kind of where I started with this. Yeah. I do not see a really good, compelling reason to put it outside the room, but I do see a very compelling reason, and lots of compelling reasons, to put it directly underneath the TV. And not the least of which is wire management becomes infinitely easier when you can just tuck it all back there and nobody's really looking. And honestly, as much as I love a clean home theater, a piece of furniture at the front of the room kind of visually is a little bit better.
Clearly, this is not a room where people are going to be like, where's the TV? You got a 100-inch TV mounted on the front wall. Having a nice, clean-looking TV stand below that TV, how does that look out of place? Or untidy in any way, And you need somewhere to put your center speaker. So, I mean, why not have a TV stand there? To me, that's the only solution.
If you really want that clean home theater look and everything, and you're like, I really don't want to have a piece of furniture in there. I'd rather just have my speakers on stands or whatever. Fine. Sure. Run it to underneath the stairs. But I don't see a compelling reason to run it all the way back to that other room.
Yeah.
Unless you are anticipating having very loud equipment. There's too many potential problems that you'll have to overcome. And this is not the kind of home theater where it's like, well, that's why I have a custom installer for. He'll just fix it. No, this is something you're going to try to do yourself. So what should the speaker configuration be? He was thinking that since the physical back wall would be so far away, it would actually make sense to stop at 5 floor level speakers. Do we agree? I mean, I do. I do, but at the same time, I kind of feel like I would run, and I know this is crazy coming from me. I kind of feel like in a room this big with the potential for having a second row of seats in the future, I would run 2 side surround speakers positioned as if you had 2 rows of seats.
Yes. That's one of his upcoming questions.
Just do it anyway.
Oh, yes.
And that would give you there'd be more sound coming from the sides and behind you at the same time. I think I might do that. I do a 5.1.46.
Okay.
And I think I might do that just because I think that in the long run, first of all, it'll save you money in having to do it later. But also, I feel like with all that cavernous space behind you, you don't want to put surround back speakers all the way on that back. Guess what? Somebody's home. Surround back speakers all the way on the back wall.
It's a little bit of a challenge, and plus, one of the ideal locations is right where there's a door going into the bedroom. I mean, traditional surround backs, if I had them, they'd go on stands, or I don't think I'd do a ceiling one because you're going to have overhead speakers. So I'm kind of in favor of not worrying too much around surround backs, honestly.
Yeah. I don't really see any way of convincingly, effectively putting in surround backs here. What about pre-wiring for a second pair of side surround speakers for the back row? He wants all of his surround speakers to be in walls with fully soundproof backer boxes that he will construct based on soundproofing company's plans. What exactly should be the distances from the front wall? They should be a little bit behind, a little bit above the seats that you plan on putting in both those locations.
So if you went with my recommendation,
I don't know what that is from the front wall, but that's where I would put them.
If you went with my recommendation of 9 to 9.5 feet from your head to the physical front wall, then I would add about a foot to that in terms of how far away from the front wall, distance from the front wall, and then add another 6 feet for the back row, or 6.5 or 7. There's nothing wrong with having the second pair of side surrounds even a little farther back, just in case you want your second row of seating to be a little bit more than 6 feet. 6 feet's kind of the minimum to be comfortable. Sometimes people are much more comfortable if that second row seat is 7 to 8 feet behind the front row. It gives you more of a walkway between the two, especially if the back row happens to be recliners and you want to be able to have it reclined and still have a walkway that's going to be more like 8 feet instead of 6 feet. So, you can have some decision there. You've got some latitude there. But yeah, I would basically have side surrounds at about 10.5 to 11 feet from the front wall for to be a nice position for the front row of seats, and then at least 6 to 7 or 8 feet again. And like Tom was saying, hey, you could try those out as surround backs if you wanted to. It's not going to hurt anything. You can always revert it if you don't like it that way.
Or just run dual side surrounds.
That's it. But I would absolutely pre-wire it. No real reason not to. The cost is negligible when everything's already open to run that little bit of extra speaker wire.
Right. So what about pre-wiring for optional front wides? I mean, I hate this idea, but I mean, you can put the wires in the walls.
Put the wires in the walls. Why not? Everything's open. It's negligible added cost.
But where are you really going to? I mean, his speakers are going to be almost slammed up against the walls, anyways. They're only going to be a couple of feet in from the wall, so that
they'd be farther down the side walls. If he wants to, why not have the wire already run? Absolutely, I would do it.
That was me sticking my tongue out.
Yes.
For overhead speakers, he's thinking the ceiling joists at 12 inches on center are too close together for in-ceiling speakers, since he'd want to construct fully soundproof backup boxes if he had them, so be okay with installing something like the SVS elevation speakers on the ceiling instead. In general, what are our thoughts on the overheads he should use? You can definitely use in-wall speakers if you really, really want to. I mean, I'm sure that there's something that you can buy or construct to do that.
Oh yeah, well I was going to mention like a great solution here would be the Dynabox from the company Dynamat. This is meant to be something that you could actually retrofit into the hole that you cut in your ceiling. It's a flexible and collapsible, heavy, thick vinyl sealed enclosure meant to go behind in-ceiling speakers for the purposes of soundproofing and to provide that damping, but in a non-rigid rear enclosure. It is 12 inches wide itself, so it's actually a little bit too wide to fit between 12 inches on center ceiling joists, but because it's flexible and collapsible, that's not really a problem. It's just going to have a little bit of a bulge somewhere, which is fine. It's totally able to do that and still work correctly. So I think you could get some Dynabox rear enclosures and do in ceilings if you want to, because it doesn't look like the ceiling height in here is tremendously oversized, just eyeballing it from the photos. This isn't some like 10 or 11 foot basement ceiling. This is once it's all finished and you're going to have that drywall down a little bit from those ceiling joists on hat channels and sound clips. I'm thinking this is pretty close to an 8-foot ceiling in here. So if you did in ceilings, there is a solution. But that all said, if you were to mount prime elevation speakers or the new ultra elevation speakers, like I don't have a problem doing that either. That would totally work. You could also, have front heights and high up on your sidewalls. That's not a bad solution in here because this space isn't particularly wide. So it's not going to be out of place if you used high up on the wall placement either. So I don't really have this is what I think you must do in here. I think you've actually got more options than you thought you had when you asked the question.
Yeah. I can go in the direction with these. Like on walls, I'm perfectly okay with, or on ceilings, I should say. Or, a smaller speaker that you just get a mount for to put up there. I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to in-ceiling speakers. Mm-hmm. And it's mostly because first of all, I don't think they make that much of a difference sonically. If you get one type or the other, I think just how it looks should be should inform your decision more than anything. Like, how important is it to you or maybe your wife that the speakers be hidden?
Well, just thinking like those Sonos Mag 8s would work really well in here from Best Buy. They don't cost an arm and a leg. You can get them with the retrofit back cans that are, in the case of the 8-inch ones, they're like $100 a piece. But and you could fit those inside of the Dynabox for even more soundproofing with the flexibility that's all going to work. And then you have that, like, it looks like, just judging by the way that this has all been framed, it's going for a flat ceiling, not bulkheads, not soffits, nothing sticking down. They've designed things so that you can have this nice flush flat ceiling. I'm thinking just looks wise, if you want this to feel like a family room and less like a bespoke theater and only a theater, that having in ceiling speakers and that visual hiding them, I think makes more sense. So I'm leaning that way, even though I'm not really like the in ceiling guy around here. For what you've got planned, I think that makes more sense. And I think those Dynaboxes give you a solution that'll work for you.
This is one of those things where it doesn't matter sonically that much.
Mm.
People want to be included in things that they're spending money on. So this is a chance for you to give somebody else in your family, like here's some options. I can't choose. You tell me which one you think would be best and just go with whatever they say. And I think that's a good opportunity to just sort of involve your better half, as they say. So he was thinking he would pre-wire for 6 overhead speakers, top fronts, middles, and rears. He would prioritize their placement for the main couch and not worry too much about the back row. Can we help him determine exact distances? So I would put the top middles obviously right above your couch, but right above your couch when you are reclined.
Yeah, I might have put them. I basically put them more or less right in line with those surround speakers. So maybe a foot and a half behind the actual physical location of the seat for the top middles. And then there's no reason not to do 45-degree angles in here for top fronts, top rears. So that's basically, I'm thinking the ceiling is a little bit more than 8 feet. So it's going to be like 4.5, 5 feet in front of you, 4.5, 5 feet behind you. That's going to be enough that they're pretty much directly overhead of the rear row.
As long as that's the case.
Yeah.
So if you decide to cheat the rear row back a little bit because you're going to have a bigger walkway,
then
I would
cheat
cheat
the
the top rears back as well, so that they are, when the people are reclined, no further forward than directly above their heads.
Again, if you're pre-wiring for the back row of side surrounds, the second pair of side surrounds, in line with those for the top rears is totally going to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he's sure he'll have more questions for us later. Was there anything else about the configuration and equipment decisions that immediately jumps out at us as something he should plan for now that the space is completely open? I don't want you to think about getting amps. I'll tell you that right now. Because you're only going to be sitting like
you might do
10 feet from that 10 feet from your speakers. I mean, that's where the row is, right?
Sure,
maybe 12 feet at the most with the angles.
The main thing I'm worried about is HVAC. HVAC. Think about that.
Well, this is clearly being done by a contractor.
I know.
But yes.
But occasionally, right, sometimes the contractor is just thinking in general terms and they aren't thinking specifically home theater terms. So exactly where those registers come out, exactly where the air return goes, just make sure that you really think about HVAC for this space because you want that to be a priority.
So right now, the way that this is kind of being laid out, you come down the stairs into the home theater and then you walk through the gym to get to a workshop. So all of these things, and there's a furnace back there too. Look at that. There's all these things that you have to worry about when it comes to HVAC as far as how things are transferring air around the different rooms and that sort of thing. And remember this, 100-inch screen, my OLED does not make this room nearly as hot as my projector used to. My projector used to just cook this room, and the OLED is much better. And the LCD will be fine too, but it's still going to put out heat. But when you start putting people in this room, it's no joke.
Yeah, that's right.
You get a lot of heat.
Yeah.
So if possible, adding a second zone or third or fifth or however many zones you have in your house already,
dedicated
for just the home theater,
zone. It would be lovely.
Is really something I would think about as being a significant. It's one of those things that you don't realize is important until it's far too late to do anything about it.
You might want it for your dedicated gym, too. It's very nice to have a separately controlled HVAC zone there. So I know that's more money if you weren't already planning for it. You probably were, because he's pretty well planned in these things. But if not, that's just something where I would take money away from the immediate finish of the theater to have the better HVAC for the future, if you hadn't already planned for that. Okay, so I've got to say we've got to speed up, because I want to get to more questions than 3 this week. So, and I've got the hard out, so let's go more quickly.
We've got 45 minutes.
I know.
Terry's a fan of Matthew Pose, who writes and contributes for Audioholics, and he also runs an acoustic design and consultation company. He recently posted a video talking about maximizing your Dolby Atmos experience in a dedicated home theater setup. He talked about timbre matching and paying attention to the dispersion and directivity of your speakers, which are topics that we have also addressed, and we all seem to be in agreement there. It's good that he's right, because I know we are. So tired of people being wrong all the time.
I see.
And he discussed how the signals themselves in the Atmos soundtrack are all actually full range, but that in a home theater, if you apply proper bass management, then what's important is for all your speakers to be able to play accurately down to the crossover frequency to your subwoofers. Again, seems like we're all in agreement up to this point. Except I don't think that there may be full range for Atmos, but let me tell you, there is not a lot of content below a certain point, generally speaking. But then he talks about the notion that maybe your front wides don't need to be as good as your front speakers. Maybe your side surrounds don't need to perfectly match your fronts, and that your surround backs, and especially overhead speakers, don't really matter much at all. He talks about that. Okay, because we talk about that too.
Well, he brings up the notion.
Yes. Matthew pushes back on that idea and says that a lot of people who mix this stuff in the industry get very upset about that because it's not true, and that's not how they use those channels. He goes on to say that purchasing surrounds, backs, and overheads that closely timbre match your fronts can properly keep up with them can be valuable and important in adhering to the creator's intent. My freaking Lord, I wrote creator's intent. Stop it. Stop talking about creator's intent as if it is a thing. It's not a thing, but whatever. Let's just go. So that seems at odds with our advice, and without turning things into some kind of flame war, which won't happen because I don't care. Terry would just like to know our thoughts and our responses to those claims. Okay, let me just say this in the easiest, most easily digestible way possible. It doesn't matter what the creator's intent was or how well those speakers match. What matters is how sensitive your ears are to those sounds that are coming from those other locations in the room. In my mind, we know, you, the listener, listening to this podcast, knows that if some sound comes from behind you, and it's important that you know something about that sound, you don't just sit there and listen. You turn and you face it. Yeah. Because that gives you the most information, and suddenly what was unclear becomes clear. What was non-directional becomes directional. What was muffled and indistinct becomes understandable immediately. So he may be right in that the creators are sitting there in their little studios. Let's all pretend.
Well, I mean, they definitely do use like identical speakers in every location. That is very much the standard in mixing and mastering
and
studios.
They may turn their face to each individual one as they are mixing to make sure that it sounds the way they want it to sound. That may be their intent, but you are not doing that. You are sitting in a home theater with a sound playing behind you, with 7 million other sounds playing all around you, and it really doesn't make that much of a difference whether or not those speakers are perfectly capable as the other ones, or that they're timbre matched or anything else, because in that cacophony, and even when it's not a cacophony, when it's just a pan around the room in a fairly silent scene except for this one sound, your ears are just not sensitive enough, and your brain fills in any slight inconsistencies.
Especially if you're watching something at the same time.
That it just doesn't matter. Yeah. So it's very easy to look at the specifications of a speaker and say, this speaker is better than this speaker because of this specification. But when you put them in the room and you listen to them, you go, they sound the same. That happens all the time, and we've all experienced it. This is the same thing to me. I'm not saying that what he's saying is wrong. What I'm saying is that it is technical. It is maybe technically correct, but at the same time, subjectively in real world
experientially,
use,
yes,
it means nothing. It means nothing.
I want to say really, really clearly, like, I really like Matthew Pose. I think he's one of the best out there doing, the writing that he does and the things that he posts. So I'm a big fan of his as well. He's got some excellent insights and wonderful knowledge and communicates it well. So I'm a huge fan of his. I don't absolutely believe that there are a lot of creators who are upset at people not using identical speakers all around, because man, oh man, I'm not saying he hasn't talked to any. He's got that information from somewhere, but I don't know if I believe that it's really widespread, because the number
upset's a very strong word.
Yeah, the number of people working in the industry who are really, really unaware of what home setups, like what's available for home setups. Yeah. Like, it's kind of remarkable. Like, a lot of these people who are this is what they do for a living, they're not so much into the consumer electronic side of things. And they're much more concerned about how the stuff that they create translates to really crappy speakers, and how it sounds coming out of the speaker that's built into your phone, and how it sounds coming out of a soundbar and built-in TV speaker. Like, they're much more concerned about how it translates to stuff that they know 100% doesn't mimic what they hear in their studio. That's their concern. They're much less concerned about someone who has the wherewithal and the financial ability to get perfectly matching speakers all around. So I don't quite believe that there are many people making this content who are upset if you don't have perfectly matching speakers. That just doesn't line up with the reality that I've experienced. But on the other side of it, as a user myself, my experience has definitely been, and I have been pretty darn picky and listened to things that aren't movies. I've listened to the test tones and test sounds and stuff like that, and tested myself to be like, can I hear when my front wide speakers don't perfectly match my fronts, or my front heights, or my surround backs? And I'm like, the thing I will say unequivocally is surround backs and front heights, if it's not a awful speaker. If it's an awful speaker, I'll be able to hear the difference. But if it's anything other than an awful speaker, if it's like anywhere near competent, somewhat neutral speaker in the front height and the surround back positions, if I'm watching the movie, I have tested myself and I cannot tell the difference. I just cannot do it. And I'm perfectly willing to put myself out there and say that.
Cue all the people who are like, well, that's just because you have crappy equipment, or you have lead ears or something like that.
Look, if you get perfectly matching speakers all around, it's not like I said you did something bad. And I mean, look, Matthew Poe's, what he designs are, multi-$100,000 theaters. And so, yeah, if you're going to sell to your clients, like, look, what's going to feel better? It's knowing, not experiencing, knowing as an exercise that whatever the signal said to play, that is exactly what those speakers played, and that there is no difference. If you have two identical sounds coming from two different channels, what's coming out of those speakers is identical, and you know that academically, and that just makes you feel good. I don't have any problem with that. If you've got the money to spend, by all means do it.
And that's what it comes down to. It's, to me at least, is, and I know you want to go on, but
I do.
The reality is that you can both be right and just be immaterial at the same time. It is possible to say something that is technically correct,
sure,
and yet has no bearing on any real world experience that anybody has.
Yeah.
So,
plus it's a little bit at odds with like all of Harman's research, which is like add a speaker, add another speaker, add another speaker, and the more speakers you add, the harder it becomes for anyone to reliably able to tell speakers apart. They're like, from mono to stereo, it becomes more difficult to tell speakers. That's why they're like, if you really want to tell speakers apart in a test setting, like we changed one driver in the speaker in the design process, what difference did it make? They're like, well, we had to test it in mono, because if we listened in stereo, let alone surround, let alone immersive, if we listened in stereo, it became difficult to reliably tell the difference between small changes in speakers. We had to listen in mono to do that. So if you're going to tell me that I have to have identical speakers overhead, no way. Just absolutely not. I just flat out don't agree with that.
So in Terry's own theater, he has walkways on either side of the room. They are 35 inches wide. So we originally thought of having on-wall surround speakers would not be any sort of problems. He has the GIC 422 panels mounted on those walls, and those are about 3.5 inches deep. And he has two pairs of Ascend at HTM 200 SE speakers mounted on the side walls, one pair for each row of seats with their grills on, and those are about 6.5 inches deep. People bump into those Ascend speakers quite often, so he wants to find a better solution. He is not keen to attempt in-wall speakers, both for soundproofing reasons and also because he already investigated his wall stud locations before, and they just don't work out perfectly for where he would want to install in-wall speakers. My man?
Yes.
Exactly.
Good for you.
We were just talking about where to install in-wall speakers with the last guy, and neither one of us thought to mention, but check your studs, because you know what? They probably
at least
aren't.
You can definitely see where the studs are, where the wall's all down.
Yeah, you're going to change your seating location based on those studs, that's for sure. So good for you, dude. So he powers both pairs of side surrounds by wiring them in series to his Denon X6700H receiver, and his front speakers are Revel Concerto series, so he wants something that would still be a good timbre match with their very neutral sound, which the Ascend speakers already were. He's looked around a bit and found the Monoprice MOW1.
Monolith on wall 1.
Okay.
It does make sense.
The depth would match his GIC panels, and the price is reasonable to him, $500 a pair, but they are spec'd as having lower than normal sensitivity at 4 ohm and a 4 ohm nominal impedance. So that, along with not knowing if they'd be a good timbre match, has him a little concerned. He also found the Focal 301 on-wall speakers available for $750 each, which is a lot, from accessories for less. They're also around 3.5 inches deep, and he's a bit more confident in their neutrality, but the price is so much higher, and that's already the discontinued accessories for less price. Discounted, yeah. Would they honestly be worth it? There's also the option of Revel's own wall-mountable surround speakers from the same Concertus series, but they're 5.5 inches deep, which you don't want because it's already part of the problem here. It's only an inch less deep than the Ascends that he already has. However, they are rounded, so then maybe that would make them a little bit less bumpable. That's not how rounded
I
works,
don't think so. People are going to be bumping into them still, yeah.
So what do we think he should get? Has he overlooked a good option? Let me say something that's going to be a little bit on the controversial side here.
Okay.
Before Rob gives you all the options of what his opinions are and everything else.
I don't have that many, yeah.
What if you just built fake columns around these things?
Yeah, like even just a visual thing that sort of,
What if you built fake columns around them and turned them into bass traps? Okay. So what if you just left your speakers where they were, you stick framing to frame in a little, rectangular space from floor to ceiling.
Yeah.
And then everything below the speaker, you just shoved full of insulation, just stacked it up, and made yourself a little bass trap there. Now they're not going to run into it anymore, right?
I am not against that. Or
and then cover the whole thing with speaker grill.
If you don't want to do anything that's DIY, GIC has those panels that are like rounded. They're like a rounded shape, and so if you mounted one like above and below the speaker, because they're actually like I think 7 or 7.5 inches at their apex, since they're rounded. But that would be so that visually people would know not to run into it, and if they did, it's like a rounded, softer surface, and then it's still slightly proud of the Ascend speakers, so there's no way they're actually hitting the speaker. So I don't know. Like
that's I think my solution.
Yeah, an acoustic treatment solution, because it's not as though we're saying take a already slightly too narrow 2-foot walkway and take 8 inches away from that. It's like, no, you got a 3-foot walkway. It's pretty comfortable, and we're taking like 6 inches away from that. People can still walk down that if they have something surrounding and visually identifying where those surround speakers are, then they won't bump into them anymore. So I think an acoustic panel solution would work. As far as alternatives that you might not have considered, I just wanted to mention Aperion does have their Novus on-wall speakers. They are nice and neutral, and the price isn't too crazy. It's $600 a pair for the one that's just a tweeter and a woofer. That said, they are 5 inches deep. So, it's only 1.5 inches less than the Ascends already, although they mount very, very flush to the wall, whereas the Ascends have a little bit of a gap between the wall and the back of the speaker. But that's just an option for on-wall speakers that I do like that aren't ridiculously overpriced at $600 a pair. And then one that might work for you, Focal has their Tiva surround speakers. They actually used to have what was the 7 series, and now they've renamed them to Tiva. But these are only 4.5 inches deep, so that might work out, and they have a little bit of an angular shape to them, so they're not the roundedness of the Revels, but they do have a bit of an angled, beveled shape, steeply beveled on their edges. So that I think they look really nice. The sound quality would be up there. However, they are $650 each. So they're slightly less expensive than the 301s that you considered, but that if that works, if they just fit better, look better, and cost a little bit less, then that's an option too. But honestly, I like Tom Solutions the best, that we add more acoustic treatments and use those to protect your surround speakers without changing the surround speakers at all.
What about the other speakers he recommended? I don't have a problem with any of them, to be honest with you.
The mono prices, I don't know if they'd be quite up to matching those front speakers.
Just click on these,
and they aren't very sensitive at all. They're
just side surrounds. It's not something.
I know. Yeah, I'm a little iffy on them. That's all. I'm a little iffy on them, and I think that there are other solutions that I would do before those. That's all.
Okay. I have to scroll now. Hold on. Ryan, Ryan says he recently discovered our podcast on YouTube and he's enjoyed it so far. He used to have an LG SL10YG soundbar with its optional wireless rear speakers added on. That made it a very optimistic 7.1.2 system that supported all of the current audio formats. He liked how its center channel output seemed so much louder and clearer than the soundbars he had tried. But he recently upgraded to an AV receiver regular speaker, so for the most part, he's really liking it. He went with a Sony DH790, which is a 7.2 channel receiver from 2018 that can handle Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, Dolby Vision, HDR10, and 4K 60. His TV is a Hisense U6K, and his sources an Apple TV 4K, his Xbox Series X. From his email, it seems as though his sources are plugged directly into his TV and is relying on eARC to send the audio back to the TV from the TV to his Sony receiver, although we aren't 100% sure about that. He says that for his Xbox, he settled on setting its audio output to bitstream, Dolby Digital.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That's not the highest end that can be output from there, although there are reasons to do that we understand.
Yeah. Believe me, as somebody who's a longtime Xbox user, I understand the crucible of trying to pick the right audio for that dang thing. It works great and everything sounds the way he expected, but he doesn't particularly like using it for streaming movies, which is why he got his Apple TV 4K. The problem is that the audio from that to Apple TV 4K is way, way quieter. He says he really has to crank up the volume dial on the Sony, and that's just to get to the comfortable level. It isn't anywhere near movie theater loud, but the volume dial is way up already. I wish he'd given us numbers.
Well, I mean, he said, but he's not using relative volume. So,
I know, but still, we could have figured it out. He never had this issue with his own LG soundbar. The Xbox and Apple TV 4K were pretty close in volume with that. So what's going on is now that he is using his Sony AV receiver, he's tried swapping HDMI cables. So that was the problem. Is
just trying.
The audio was getting hung up in there. Switching the HDMI ports, turning eARC on and back off again. Tried looking through the TV and receiver settings. No luck so far. Can we help? Yeah. The Apple TV 4K has got a lower volume. I don't know what to tell you. That's just the way it is. On my... I have talked about this extensively on AV Gadgets, but apps don't have the same volume. There's no uniformity between them.
But no, I mean, like just overall, like it was like a 20 to 30 dB difference.
That seems excessive, but I mean, my YouTube app is negative 35.
Yeah.
Okay, my Netflix app is minus 10.
Sure,
that is a 25 dB swing between apps on the Apple TV 4K.
Yeah, but he's saying like everything is just much quieter than it used to be. So I mean, I just wanted to suggest to him something that he could definitely try, because this isn't going to cost any money, and there's no technical reason that would limit anything in this case, particularly with the Apple TV 4K. That's never going to be putting out more than 4K 60. There's no limiting because you wanted 120 hertz or something like that. The Apple TV 4K just doesn't do that. I would try plugging your Apple TV 4K into one of your Sony receivers' HDMI ports rather than having the Apple TV 4K plugged directly into the TV and relying on eARC. Because the way that the Apple TV 4K outputs sound is a little bit unusual. Everything that comes out of the Apple TV 4K, unless you specifically go into its audio settings and say output everything as Dolby Digital, which is what you actually did for your Xbox, and you can do the same thing for your Apple TV 4K. But unless you do that, by default, the Apple TV 4K actually outputs everything as a PCM signal, as an uncompressed PCM signal. And it's got coding in there that some TVs trip up with. Not so much just playing it back in stereo through their own speakers, but when they are trying to pass it through an ARC connection, it basically just downgrades it to like either a 2-channel signal, or the TV sometimes re-encodes it as Dolby Digital itself, because that's the only thing it's able to pass through ARC. So having the Apple TV 4K plugged directly into one of your Sony receivers' HDMI ports, make sure that there isn't some weird funkiness going on with the TV sitting in between the source device and the AV receiver that's handling the audio. And that Sony receiver can pass through all the video signals that an Apple TV 4K is capable of outputting. You're not limiting what's going to get passed along to your TV. And you already have an HDMI connection going from your AV receiver to your TV, so that's no issue. You don't have to change anything there.
Yeah.
So,
because
you're
generally
using...
speaking, you should connect everything to your receiver if at all possible.
Yeah.
I know it's not the way that you're used
for
to
the
doing
Xbox, if you want the 120 hertz, then that's the limiting factor, and it makes sense. So, I mean, I could say some things about the Xbox too, because your Xbox is capable of outputting Dolby Atmos for games. You know, even if you're only using your Xbox for games, there are games that use Dolby Atmos, and right now you're not getting that by forcing your Xbox to output Dolby Digital. I'm thinking maybe the reason he did that is because he's like, well, I tried other settings and it didn't get through my television back to my AV receiver in a way that worked reliably, which is very common with an Xbox. So I would sort of put it to you, how often are you really gaming at 120 hertz versus 60 hertz? Because there aren't really that many games that honestly like truly perform better at 120 hertz on the Xbox versus a locked 60.
Yeah, a lot of times you have to lower the resolution just to get the 120 hertz to work to begin with.
So I would put it to you, try plugging your source devices into the HDMI inputs of your Sony receiver and then passing the video along out of the receiver into your TV. I totally understand why you had your sources plugged into your TV, which then fed the soundbar, because that soundbar, I think, only has an HDMI ARC port. There's no other way to do it. But on the receiver, it has HDMI ports. I would plug all your sources in there and then run that. You already have the cable running up to your TV, and I would just change what your sources are plugged into. And I'm willing to bet that that'll solve this issue, just doing that.
All right, my stupid trackpad is not working right now, so I'm trying to figure out a workaround here.
Yes.
Tom, not me, somebody else. To start, Tom just wanted to share a quick bit of excitement as he recently got a used LG G3 OLED in pristine condition for a great price. It's replacing a B8 OLED. The only downside is the B8 had been professionally calibrated, so he'll be losing that, but he's pretty sure it's worth it.
Congratulations.
I think so too. On to his question. It's actually for a friend of his who recently replaced a Pioneer Kuro Plasma. It finally died, so he was forced to get something new, and he found a Samsung QN90B QLED at an estate sale, so that's what he got. Tom said his friend has not kept up with any of the latest, so he's clueless about HDR and all the various picture settings. He's also still rocking a Kenwood receiver. I didn't know those still existed. From 30 years ago, that only has stereo analog input. So first up, Tom is going to suggest getting an HDMI ARC audio extractor. Those are the ones that only cost $30. That work well enough. Is that the most reasonable solution for the audio side of things? I would just connect everything to the TV and then
he still is. Yeah. Because he needs to convert the audio to stereo analog to plug it into that Kenwood receiver, and that TV doesn't have an analog audio output anymore. But it doesn't
even have like a headphone output. A lot of times they have like an aux output that's like a 3.5 millimeter.
It's all digital. All digital. But I do believe it has an optical audio output, and I would venture that, because I mean HDMI ARC is just so darn flaky sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be any more expensive to get an optical to stereo analog converter box, because those are dirt cheap. You can pick one of those up on Amazon easily. And I would, because all you're outputting is stereo anyway, right? That's not, there's no question about that. So I would just use a stereo optical audio output, just get one of those little converter. Those are going to be like $15. It's going to be even cheaper. Just because ARC, sometimes it's flaky.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So Tom bugged his friend to put his new Samsung TV into filmmaker mode as a start, and for a new 4K HDR source, he went with Apple TV 4K. They're both a little unsure about the ideal settings for Apple TV 4K, so could we help them out with those? I need to write that article about it.
Sure. And thankfully it's not overly complicated with it. I'm just going to say, like, I am plugging into a TV that does support Dolby Vision. So right off the bat, it says, do you want to try Dolby Vision? And you pretty much always want to select no, because otherwise everything will come out in a Dolby Vision container all the time. And I don't want my menus coming out in Dolby Vision. I don't want stuff that isn't Dolby Vision being stuck into a Dolby Vision container by the Apple TV 4K. Now that is not going to appear on a Samsung TV, but it will ask you if you want to do HDR10 plus. And it's the same situation. You're going to answer not now to that. Otherwise, everything all the time will come out in an HDR10 plus container, and I don't want that for my movies and for content that isn't actually in that format. So from there, you're just going to go to the regular settings app, and within there, you're going to go to the video and audio section. That part's pretty self-explanatory. But here is where you're going to choose what the default output format is. Now, if you want the TV to automatically switch into standard dynamic range when that's what the original signal was, and then change to high dynamic range when that's what the signal is, I set the default format to 4K SDR, standard dynamic range. That way my menus and standard dynamic range video comes out at 4K standard dynamic range, and that's the default. And I leave that at 60 hertz because there's not really much reason not to for your menus. Then if you go to the next one, which is the HDMI output, I leave that at the default. When you plug this into a TV, it's going to set itself to YCBCR. And the other two options are RGB. Which can be useful if you're connecting it to a computer monitor. But you're connecting it to a TV. There's not really any reason to change that HDMI output setting from YCBCR to anything else. So leave that alone. Then you have the chroma setting, which gives you the options for either 444 or 420, and it's very tempting to say, hey, 444 is a bigger number than 420, but all of your incoming streaming video sources are in 420, and I would leave it there, because if there's going to be any weird errors, just having the signal come from the internet through the Apple TV 4K without the 4K touching anything, leaving that at 420 is the setting that I choose there. And that's a little bit different than some people might recommend, but there's just fewer problems with the black level setting itself weirdly or something like that on your TV, and it's tough to figure out why. The match content, this is optional, but I very much like to match the dynamic range and match the frame rate. That lets you automatically switch from standard dynamic range to high dynamic range and back, and it lets you switch to 24 frames per second if that's what the incoming signal is, and then back to 60 frames per second when you're at your menus or anything that's in 60 frames. And it works really well on the Apple TV 4K, and I like having those both on. The quick media switching, I don't bother with that because occasionally it glitches, and who the heck cares? It really doesn't take that long on a Samsung or an LG TV to do the switching properly.
Remarkable how fast it switches, honestly.
The audio in your case, like I connected it to something that supported Atmos and it automatically set that. In your case, you're connecting it to the Samsung TV, which probably does support Atmos internally, but once you set it to output optical audio in stereo, then you're just going to have the audio set to stereo output for the audio format, and that's pretty self-explanatory, and that's all you need to do is have that set to stereo from the Apple TV 4K. The rest of it you don't need to touch. You don't need to mess with the calibration settings on the Apple TV 4K itself, so leave those alone. Don't get too curious, and that's about it. That's all the settings you need for your Apple TV 4K.
All right. Henry says he's going to be moving later this year, and he will be renting. He loves his current home theater, which he has totally blacked out, but he's guessing his future landlord won't be keen on letting him paint his room entirely black. Can't stand the idea. That's a
good bet. I don't think most landlords would let you do that fully black.
He can't stand the idea of going backwards in experience and performance, so he's thinking what he'll do is hang black velvet curtains to completely cover a room in his new rented place, but he still wants to hang. Sorry, that should be hang his acoustic panels as well. So he's wondering if he hangs his panels on the walls as normal and covers them up with black velvet curtains, will that adversely affect the performance of his panels? Will it be worth still having the acoustic panels on the walls behind the curtains at all? Okay, so let's assume a couple of things here. First, we're assuming that this is not acoustically transparent black velvet stuff.
I mean, velvet doesn't tend to be particularly acoustically transparent now.
Let's also assume that whatever he's buying is also, flame retardant or whatever it needs to be in order to make sure that he's not hanging stuff that will eventually cause his place to burn down, or him to be blamed for the fact that the place burned down. So let's assume those two things. And if you're not making sure of these things, then you need to, especially the flame rating part of it, you need to do that, because I am all for hanging black fabric. Okay.
Sure.
I don't necessarily think it has to be velvet. I think that you could get away with something black that is acoustically transparent. And then the answer is knock yourself out as long as it's flame rated.
What I was thinking, because this is going to be a lot of material that you need to get, so I'm kind of doubting you're buying maybe he was thinking buying pre-finished curtains. That's going to be quite a lot of money. Yeah. But I'm thinking what might make sense here is go to Acoustimac, because they just sell raw fabric, which it's 4 panels, so it's pretty close to acoustically transparent, if not completely. And they have that suede. They have that acoustically transparent suede fabric that is fire rated, and is available in black, and I mean, I think a suede fabric is going to look at every bit as nice as a velvet fabric, and you can get a whole bunch of it for less money because you're buying it in bulk in a big roll from them. So I think doing that, the acoustically transparent suede that's fire rated from Acoustimac is where I would point you for this solution. And then, by all means, put your panels behind that. It's no problem because they wrap their own panels in it.
Yeah, so the other side of this is, what if he is just buying like blackout curtains or something?
Right.
And the curtains, of course, should be fine to hang from the walls. They are curtains. That's what they're made for. So I would imagine that would not be an issue. But sonically, how is that going to affect this? Anything any sound that does not pass through them and goes into the acoustic panel is reflected as if it were a wall. So that's what your risk is. Your risk is essentially, will the bass still be absorbed by your acoustic panels on the walls? At the lowest part of the bass that they can absorb will still be absorbed because it will pass through those curtains, no problem. But the higher frequencies will start reflecting more.
Yeah.
So you will end up with reflections again in your room.
And then sometimes, of course, people go, well, I use curtains as pseudo treatments anyway, but for that to be effective, they need to be really, really highly pleated, like more bunched together and pleated than you would normally have curtains, which means that is way more fabric in curtains than you might be anticipating and purchasing, because if you're going to pleat them up that much, then it gets a little wild.
What I would recommend. I would recommend hanging the minimum amount of fabric as possible in your space, just around wherever your field of view is, just in front of you, basically. And
the shadow box effect.
And I can make the argument. I don't remember. Did he say he have a projection screen?
No, but it sounded like he does. It sounds like it. Yeah, I can't remember.
Even if you do have a projection screen and you're like, I want to be in a completely black box. All right. Why don't you just try not being in a black box for a second and just put the acoustic the black fabric just on the front wall, basically.
Okay.
And that usually will give you enough of the effect that you're looking for that it will be fine. I think it'll be good. Turn the lights off, hang curtains over every window, close the door. I mean, that's my suggestion, but you do you.
So I lost Tom there. We're having internet problems over on his end, but I'm just going to carry on my own, and I've got to get running here in just about 10 minutes, so I'm going to see what I can knock out here. So Mohsen in Australia, Mohsen says he appreciated us bringing him back down to earth regarding his desire to upgrade his Yamaha RXV 2085 receiver, possibly two separates, costing around 7,000 Australia dollars, now that he has completed all of the other suggestions that we had for his home theater, which is very nice, looking great here, all blacked out, and just some reminder photos there from last week. But yeah, he took our advice under consideration and says he got a laugh from what we said, and it also made sense to him where we were coming from. We did say that upgrading his Yamaha receiver is not out of the question. There can be genuinely different features that from his current Yamaha AV receiver and things that it doesn't offer. But that part of his that is part of his curiosity, not just potentially adding more speakers to his current 9-channel setup, which is where his Yamaha tops out, but also trying out Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 instead of YPOW, or Dirac, which is an option on a modern Denon or Marantz AV receiver, or Anthem Arc Genesis, their room correction too. He's just curious about giving that a try. One thing that he hasn't been able to get out of his head is that he knows a couple of other home theater fans who got Anthem MRX 1140 receivers specifically, and they just keep going on and on about the massive difference that they heard, and he's always been a little bit skeptical of their claims, but he just can't shake the curiosity, how that feels. So on the other hand, he's also considering that if he sets aside $5,000 to $7,000 to spend something in his theater to upgrade, that could potentially go to trying out different speakers versus his current Klipsch speaker setup, rather than spending all of that on a new receiver or on separate. So just in general, what are our thoughts on that? What could have been so different about his Anthem AV receiver, or about the Anthem AV receiver, the MRX 1140 that a couple of his friends got, that just made this massive difference and improved the sound so much for them? What would it make more sense to put his budget towards new speakers rather than a new receiver? and or amplifiers. So yeah, on that first part, what could have been so different in the sound? I mean, part of it, of course, is just expectation bias. I upgraded to a new, more expensive, more capable AV receiver, and so I've prepped myself. I'm expecting to hear this massive difference. So naturally, I do, even though if in a completely blind listening condition, scientifically tested conditions, maybe you wouldn't be able to actually detect that difference. That is somewhat questionable. It might be more psychological than it is, genuinely detectable blind difference. But that said, there's a bit more to it than that. I think there could be a genuine difference in the sound that they're hearing because Anthem receivers do a very good job of explaining their whole setup procedure and really getting you to do a full suite of measurements when you're running Arc Genesis, as well as walking you through, sort of all the connection, making sure that all of your speakers are properly positioned. Denon and Marantz do this very well as well through their setup wizard. But Anthem has good instructions that it's like, this is another case of, are you attributing all of the difference thinking that you changed one variable when you changed one AV receiver to another? Or did you actually change many variables, or at least more than one variable when you did this change, that it isn't really just a one-for-one swap? Because with an AV receiver, it basically can't be. You might have changed one piece of equipment, but you didn't change just one variable. You certainly changed, the amplification has changed. Not that I would expect that to make much of a difference, but you've changed the whole setup. You've changed the room correction from whatever it is that you had before. That's more than one variable that's going on. That's not just because one box got swapped for another box that you only changed one variable. So I would expect that, if they really followed the full setup procedure that Anthem lays out in their manual and in, their online procedure that you do, because you pretty much do all of the Arc Genesis stuff through a laptop. If they followed all of that, I would anticipate that a difference was heard. Also, the way that just the trim levels are set and where the master volume is set, that's not as automated as it is with Odyssey. With Odyssey, you don't have a lot of choice in where the reference volume is set because that's all just done automatically by plugging the Odyssey microphone directly into the AV receiver. With the Arc Genesis system, it's a little bit more similar to Dirac, where the microphone is being plugged into your laptop and you're running all of the room correction software on your laptop, and you can sort of arbitrarily choose where your reference volume ends up being. Very commonly, people end up setting the quote-unquote reference volume to just where they're used to having their master volume set, which might be at -10 or -20. Then it comes along and raises that to actual reference volume, rather than 0 dB on the master volume dial being reference volume. So they very well might be hearing their system 10 decibels or, maybe just 5 decibels, but something noticeably louder than they were used to before. And they're like, whoa, that sounds way better. Even though I think I'm keeping the volume dial at the same place I always do, it's actually considerably louder than it used to be before. So that could explain why the difference was heard. The chances that it's just somehow like decoding and steering the sound so much better, no, that just quite plainly isn't the case. And if room correction is run properly between these different systems, they're all very similarly capable. I'm not going to claim they have identical sound because they go for, by default, slightly different target curves, and there could be a genuinely different sound going on there. But to be like raving about how different it is, I think it's more likely that they actually had a change in where their default master volume ended up getting set, because that's quite a common thing to do in Arc Genesis. Personally, what would I spend that money on if I had $5,000 to $7,000 set aside? If what you want is to genuinely hear the largest difference, then without question, spend the money on speakers. The thing is, that's no guarantee you're going to prefer the sound, because your Klipsch speakers have a fairly characteristic sound, although he's got reference premieres that are, more towards the linear end of what Klipsch has ever done. I really quite like those reference premiere speakers, but you can, without question, have a different sound, a noticeably, genuinely blind listening conditions 100% of the time you're able to hear that difference reliably. Changing the speakers is what would do that. If what you want is a difference in the sound, then spend the money on the speakers. But if you were wanting to increase your channel count anyway, that 9 isn't enough and you wanted to go to 11 or 13, I can justify you spending the money on the AV receiver. There are differences to be had there, but if you really want the most noticeable difference, without question, change the speakers. All right, so I'm going to move on to Chris. He is back one more time to try and sort out the remaining issues that he is having after recently purchasing 2 new displays, a Hisense U7K that's connected to a Denon X3400H and a Roku streaming box, and then separately a 27-inch LG UltraGear 1440p computer monitor, and that's connected to a Denon X1300W AV receiver and an Apple TV 4K. So first up, that darn Hisense with the X3400H and the Roku combo, it still isn't quite perfect. He followed the advice that I gave. He plugged the Roku directly into the Hisense TV and redid its Roku remote setup, and he can confirm it controls the TV just fine. And then with the Roku still plugged straight into the TV and sending the audio to the Denon via HDMI eARC, but still using the Roku's remote, everything powers on together. He's able to control the volume on the Denon receiver using the Roku remote and that signal going through the Hisense TV. That part of CEC all working fine, but when he presses power off, the Roku powers off, the TV powers off, but the Denon stays on, and we just can't figure this out. That's the only thing that's really wrong at this point, and if he uses the Hisense TV's remote, well then it all works. The Denon powers on, the TV powers on, they power off together, so it's like, it seems it's so close, it's tantalizing, and that makes it all the more frustrating. So any final ideas on that one? And honestly, I'm afraid I have to say no. I don't know what the problem is at this point. If it's working with the Hisense TV remote, that means the CEC signal is getting through the TV when the TV powers off to turn the Denon remote, the Denon receiver off. The only thing I could say at this point is, without changing any configuration settings for the Roku remote, now try plugging the Roku streaming box into the Denon's HDMI input and having the signal path go that way. But I don't think that works because the way the Roku remote, it actually sends out an IR command to the television, and then it relies on the television sending the CEC command to the Denon, and for whatever reason, that just isn't working. So other than replacing the Roku remote with a universal remote like a Sofa Baton X1S, which is a fair bit of money at this point for this type of system, I don't know a way that we're going to get this Roku remote specifically turning off that Denon. It just seems to be one of those weird CEC glitches that we cannot fix. So then his other setup, the 27-inch monitor with the Denon X1300W and an Apple TV 4K, he set the output settings for his Apple TV 4K the way we suggested, and we just did it earlier this episode, so you can go through again. And happily, he had a bit of a surprise, which is that he set the Apple TV 4K to locked 1080p resolution output, because the monitor's 1440p, but we know that Denon X1300W won't pass through its on-screen overlays, like the volume overlay, if you set it to anything higher than 1080p. So we locked the Apple TV 4K output resolution to 1080, and then he set it to the 420 chroma that we talked about, instead of leaving that at 444, set that to 420, and happily, when he did that, now the Apple TV 4K is able to switch between HDR and SDR, and the Denon's volume display still overlays on that. That all works. So the only explanation there is that it must be a bandwidth limitation on the Denon's HDMI pass-through and screen overlay versus like just strictly SDR versus HDR, because that's working, so yay, that part works now. But he had one other issue, which is that the black levels, when he's watching standard dynamic range, remain raised, even with the chroma set to 420 instead of 444. The black levels in standard dynamic range on this 27-inch computer monitor, they remain raised, and so something else has to be changed there. We had mentioned maybe try setting the output instead of YCBCR, that HDMI output setting, set that to RGB. That was one of the suggestions, and he just couldn't find that, although in his email, he didn't say YCBCR, he said something else, so maybe he misheard what I said there and was looking for something different. So in those video and audio settings for the Apple TV 4K, there's the format that he has now set to 1080p and SDR by default, and right below that is that HDMI output setting. And that's where you can choose between YCBCR, which is the default, or, and it's great, it gives you RGB high or RGB low. And so in your case, I'm pretty sure the monitor has locked itself to what would be the RGB high setting. But of course, it's easy enough to just try both. Try RGB high and RGB low, and whichever one gives you the correct black levels, that's the way to go. If that option for some reason doesn't appear within your Apple TV 4K settings, the only option is going to be to go into the settings of that 27-inch LG monitor itself and look for a black level setting, which is probably going to give you a choice between full or limited. And you would want to set it to limited if this is what's going on. If the black levels always looked raised with standard dynamic range, then what you want is the monitor to have the black level set to limited. But if you are able to get into that HDMI output setting in the Apple TV 4K, setting that to RGB high should work. That should send the full signal where black is now a 0 signal level instead of a 16 signal level, and it should erase those overly brightened blacks. Okay, so I would love to do more here, but we had technical difficulties that interrupted things. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode, and we have left on the list Steven, Kevin, and then I bumped down the question that I was inspired by Steve from last week because it wasn't time sensitive. But I've got this hard out that I've got to get going, so unfortunately I've got to cut it off there. Apologies for that, and I wish we didn't have those technical errors that ate up some time in between, because this was the worst day to have it. But to thank our listeners of the week, I want to thank our 134 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast, including Terry being one of them. Thank you so much for your financial support and setting up those automatic monthly donations. Thanks to JD for sending a Movies Anywhere code to Tom, and thank you so much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement from Ilango, Terry, Tom, Andrew, and Dan. We very much appreciate that. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. If you want your questions answered, all you have to do is ask via email. Email us at question@avrant.com. First in, first out, and we will get to your questions. Even if we're time crunched, we'll just bump it to next week, and everything that comes in, we answer on the podcast. So thank you so much to everybody. On behalf of Tom Andry, this has been AVRant. I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.